Today we're going to make this super nerdy bag with the help of my Cricut Joy. Sewing projects are especially hard for me because of where I live. Every surface is covered in sawdust or metal shavings or sand or peanuts, but I made do with what I had. I recently got back into playing video games, and I kind of started collecting a lot of accessories. So I decided it was time to make a bag to carry them all with me when I'm on the go. I started with 1/4-inch felt to give the bag structure and also to protect the more fragile pieces from clanging around. I had the idea for the basic shape, but I needed all the pieces to figure out the exact dimensions. I used a rotary cutter, but because the felt is so thick, I had to make a couple passes, and even then, I missed a couple spaces. I decided on the layout that I wanted, and I marked where all the walls would go. All the walls meaning the protective layers between each piece. Now that I have a floor plan, I can figure out how tall I need the walls to be. There must be better words than I'm using, but I just can't think of them. I then marked and cut each piece. Ah, sweet repetition. I had always planned on using fabric glue to glue all the pieces together because I already had it. It does say that it's not to be used on felt, but I did it anyways. It was a terrible idea, and I don't know why I didn't use a hot glue gun. I just didn't think of it. It did work, it was just very messy and it took a while to dry, and I wasn't sure it was going to dry at all, but it did. It was fine. I should have used a hot glue gun. This is the part where I casually walk off screen to cut another piece that I forgot to cut before, and then I casually walk back on screen. Nothing to see here. With the inner structure done, I set it aside to dry for many, many hours. I used a thinner felt for the bottom of the bag. This would provide durability, but also I wanted to fold the felt up the sides of the bag to create outer pockets. I also cut 2 strips that would become the handles of the bag. On to the body. This is a canvas drop cloth. It is literally the same as the thing I'm sitting on. I like sewing with canvas drop cloths because they're just so versatile, and turns out they take fusible ink really well. I had a basic idea of the dimensions of the cloth, but what you don't see is that I cut these pieces out and then later had to cut new pieces because they were too small. This is why you should plan things, or at least have good plans. There were a lot of creases in the material because it had been folded up for so long, but I had my easy press out anyways, and it took no time at all to iron them out. Unlike the felt, the canvas does need to be hemmed, so I marked out seam allowance on either side, also on the bottom and the top. Now comes the fun part. I used Cricut's Design Space to format my graphics. All I had to do was click on the upload button and find the graphics that I had already selected. In this case, it was Mog the Moogle. This particular graphic had a white background, but it's easy enough to erase. Click, 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 click. Save and move forward. I wanted him to be as big as possible, which for the Cricut Joy is about 4 inches because you want to leave a little bit of space around the sides. I changed my line type from cut to draw and chose my marker, which in this case was Infusible Ink Pen. I selected matte as my load type and centered my graphic. I didn't need to mirror this graphic, but for iron-ons, it's kind of a good habit to get into. I'm using plain white paper, the same thing that I put in my printer. Design Space will tell you when your Cricut is ready to accept materials, and the sensors will feed it automatically. Then all you have to do is sit back and watch. I had 3 graphics picked out and each one printed in under a minute. If you're like me, then you read all instructions thoroughly, but you also don't retain any of the knowledge, so you accidentally buy the wrong size pen. But it turned out to be a happy accident because I then used those pens to fill in the outlines that I printed. To fuse the ink to the material, I put the canvas on the press mat and centered my graphic. I then put a layer of parchment paper between the graphic and the easy press because the ink will bleed through a little bit. I had already set the temperature and the timer as per the instructions on Cricut's website. It's just that easy. I had to redo one of the pieces because I had cut the material too small, but as you can see, this second printing with the same graphic came out perfect. Now that the graphics are in place, I can fold over the seam allowance and iron it down. People are always telling me that I need to make a sewing table, but even if I had space for one, I actually kind of prefer sewing on the floor, although it's not ideal to be sitting on fabric while sewing fabric. If you've used a sewing machine, then you know why. I sewed the sides to the back/top and then added the gray felt, the dark gray felt, not the light gray felt. That comes later. This part took a ridiculous amount of time because I was making it up as I went along and I kept realizing that I couldn't actually access the places where I needed to sew. So this took a few hours. It was also extremely awkward, and probably not the best video content. But it just goes to show you, if you really want to get it done, you will figure it out. I didn't have one zipper that was long enough to close the entire bag, so I used two zippers that would meet in the middle. This was the first time I had ever sewed a zipper on with a sewing machine, and while I did manage to do it, I won't be showing you any close-ups of that stitching. Let's just pretend that it came out perfect. I almost forgot to add the handles to the bag, but at the last minute while I was pinning the bottom half of the zipper in place, I remembered and removed two pins so that I could fit the handles in. The sewing machine did its best to get in all the corners, but it didn't quite reach in two of them, so I hand sewed it. I also hand sewed the other side of the handles on. It adds a little bit more durability to the handles to have it sewed all the way up the side of the bag, but it also hides a little bit the fact that I didn't really center the graphics very well. Shh, don't tell anyone. And that's it. The sewing part of this bag is finished. Now comes the true test. Assembly time. So there you have it. It is by no means perfect, but you know what? Sewing is harder than welding. Yeah, I said it. I want to say a big thank you to Cricut for sponsoring this video, but for also encouraging me to try out new things. I usually hate trying new things because I don't like not being good at something, but turns out printing those graphics was the easiest part of the build. If you want to see what I'm up to on a more regular basis, follow me on Instagram. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up because you're proud of me, because this is a sponsored video. It's like I'm a grown-up. And also, don't forget to leave me a comment. Tell me about what nerdy graphic you would have put on your video game bag. I'd love to hear it.